Let's take a look at your finished table and compare it to the reference.htm file in the finished files directory. So I have reference.htm opened up from the finished files, and I'm just going to go through the steps again and kind of show you what I came up with in terms of the solution, and you can compare it to this one and see how close our code matches. So the first thing I wanted to do was grab the data at the bottom of the page and then create a basic table with 3 columns and 18 rows. So if I scroll down, you can see here's the table, and each table cell has indeed the content that I just cut and pasted from the table data there below it. The next thing was to examine the data to determine which cells should be table header cells. And I think it's pretty apparent that these 3 right here, character, description, and entity, sort of describe the content that appears below them. And because of that, you'll notice that these are now scoped for columns. So if you scope them for rows, that's not correct. You wanted to scope those for columns because they indicate the content below them within the column. That goes on to point number 4. But before we go there, let's say set the cell padding and cell spacing for the table to 0, set the border to 1. Let's take a look at that. Those attributes appear within the table tag themselves. There's border equals 1, cell spacing and cell padding. And to make our table more accessible, which was the next point, we did indeed add a summary, and we have our table header scope. Now I want to go to the summary for a moment. So here's what I came up with. A quick reference of named character entities, including an example of the character, a description, and the entity code. You may have gone into a little bit more detail than I did, or yours may be a little bit more brief. One of the things that you have to do as you start writing table summaries is really hit that sweet spot where you don't want to run on for too long, but you also don't want to be so short that it's essentially the same as the caption. The next step is one I really want to talk about. Create a caption for the table. Consider whether existing page content can be incorporated into the table. So I dropped some hints there, obviously. And at the very top of the table, you'll notice that inside the caption, I just went ahead and moved that heading 3 that was above the table before into the caption. This is something that I see people doing all the time. What they'll do is they'll put a header above the table that is really a caption for the table, and then not put a table caption down. As you can see, if we preview this in a browser, there's the header right on top of the table. I could use CSS to change the spacing if I wanted to, but right now I'm using styles to control the look and feel of this. But essentially, it's serving the same purpose that it did before. Because this is a heading 3, it's going to create a new section in my document outline. If I'm thinking in terms of a table of contents, it's going to be in the table of contents, if you will. And it still serves as the table caption. So the term win-win comes to mind. Now, did you do the exact same thing? Some of you may have just taken the text, common named character entities, and put it inside the caption without the H3 tag surrounding it. If you did that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It probably doesn't look the same when you preview it in the browser. And that's simply because I didn't write a style for the caption that was apart from H3. But that's still quite acceptable. So there are multiple right answers for that one, if you will. And you may have even come up with an entirely different caption. And if that's the case, that's fine. The final instruction was, in the first table cell of each row, give the table cell a class attribute of center to take advantage of existing styles in the CSS. Now, what I mean by that is this page already has styles applied to it. We're going to talk about styles in the next chapter, but essentially we already have an external CSS file that's controlling the look and feel of this. One of the things that you'll notice about content within table cells is they're not always positioned within the cell the way you'd want them to. You can see the rest of the content here is left aligned into the cell. But this character, if it was left aligned, it would look really weird. And it did look kind of weird. So I created a class selector that sets text alignment to center. That way we don't have to use any deprecated attributes within the table cells that are hard to maintain. And all you needed to do was go into the first table cell of each row and apply the class of center to it. We didn't have to do it to the table headers because by default they're centered. But we did need to do it to each table cell in the row. I realized that you hadn't set classes before. That instruction may have been a little confusing. Your code may not match mine exactly, but that is what I was trying to get you to do when applying that class. I hope your table came out as expected, and I hope you had some fun along the way. Now, as you learn more about tables, you're going to need to start creating more complex tables. We've been working with really simple ones. So as you start learning more about them, be sure to focus on learning about additional table tags like T-head and T-body that can help you when you need to build tables that are more complex than what we've been working with.